At this time, I would like to call to order the September 11th, 2017 Town Council meeting for the town of Crewe. I'll be presiding this evening. Unfortunately, Mayor Eanes is under the weather, and he kindly decided not to come so he wouldn't infect the rest of us. So we wish him speedy recovery. At this time, I ask you to please stand for the invocation and the pledge. And in honor of September 11th, Mayor Eanes has asked me to read a prayer of remembrance for the 16th anniversary of the tragic attacks at 9/11. Father in heaven, we take this time on the anniversary of the tragic attacks on our nation on September 11th, 2001, to remember those men and women who have served in the defense of our citizens at home and abroad. We remember and give thanks to the countless local men and women who have donned the uniform of our nation to take the fight to the enemies of the freedom of speech, of expression, freedom to worship God in our own way, freedom from want by the use of the exercise of our own labors, and freedom from fear. We remember the families of our fallen who are faced with a lifetime of sadness following the loss of their loved one. As we remember our local fallen who sacrificed their lives while in the service of our republic in the defense of their homes and families, let us remember them. Peggy Hurt, a Department of Defense civilian, was killed when terrorists crashed one of the 4 planes into the Pentagon on September 11, 2001. With Lunenburg roots, she lived in Crewe for a period of time. Army Staff Sergeant Jason Arnett of Amelia County. Jason's Gold Star mother, Michelle Mickey Arnett Bryant, is now a resident of Burkeville. Jason was a member of the Company C, 14th Infantry Regiment, 10th Mountain Division. He was mortally wounded in action by an improvised explosive device in Baghdad on April 1st, 2007. He is now buried in Arlington Cemetery. Marine Corporal Jonathan Tyler Yale, killed in Iraq, grew up in Burkeville and Meharan. In 2008, while standing on guard duty in Ramadi, Iraq, he and Corporal Jonathan Carter faced down a suicide truck bomber, killing the terrorist and stopping a truck full of explosives. The truck exploded, killing both Yale and his colleague. Their actions saved over 150 lives. There are generations of Americans and Iraqi yet to be born who will owe their very existence to the fact that these 2 Marines gave their lives to save fellow Marines and Iraqi police allies, men who would now live to be fathers, grandfathers, and great-grandfathers. His actions were of such magnitude that he was posthumously recognized with the Navy Cross. Coast Guard Lieutenant Adam Bryant, the son of Nina Bryant of Crewe. On October 29, 2009, Adam, age 28, and the crew of an HC-130 aircraft were conducting a search and rescue mission near San Clemente Island in California when it collided with a Marine Corps helicopter. Coast Guard Vice Commandant and Admiral Sally Bryce O'Hara said Bryant and his crew made the ultimate sacrifice while serving our nation. The sacrifices of these young veterans is our community's most recent reminder that freedom is not free. Amen. Amen. I would also like to ask you to remember in your prayers the people who are suffering from the recent hurricanes and so much devastation. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. At this time, I would like to call to order our public hearing for this evening. We have 2 advertisements, and they are very closely related. One is to the change to the town charter amendment, section 3.5, powers and duties of the mayor. Make sure I read the right one. And basically what this does is delete from the powers of the mayor. The police force of the town shall be under the control of the mayor for the purpose of enforcing peace and good order and executing the laws of the state and the ordinances of the town. That is taken out. And the second, the ordinance amendments, is the change is that then, instead of the mayor, that the town manager will be directly in charge of the chief of police as well as other department heads. The wording is that it will include the police department through the head of each department. Town council, to make it clear, still oversees all of these, but it is a change in what was considered an outdated charter, so that we can make our practice come into compliance with what we have here. Are there any comments from the public? All right, do I hear a motion to close?
So moved. Second.
All right, at this time, we'll entertain comments from the public. Are there any delegations from the public? Hearing none, we'll move on to the consent calendar. Matters of the consent calendar are considered routine and will be approved by one motion. Any item can be removed from the calendar at the request of a member of council and may be voted on separately. In your packets, gentlemen, you have minutes from the town council meeting of May 8th, as well as your bill sheet, and you have received additions this evening. Total additions of $483.29, bringing the total bill sheet to $119,464.63.
That should say August.
August, sorry. I was thinking that was.
Yeah.
August 8th.
We never got ARPA's in.
No.
ARPA didn't send in.
Nope.
I like the town violation for furniture and yard. I said I like the town violation for furniture and yard. Is that,
Yeah.
start voting after?
Yeah.
Vice Mayor, I move we approve the consent calendar as written. And as well as the additions to the bill sheet.
That's second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. Moving on to town manager's report.
Just a few items that won't sound redundant. Honestly, there's not a whole lot going on right now, which is a good thing. We've got plenty of water in the lake. The Lord's been good with respect to that. The water tank project is almost completed. The tank itself has been painted inside and out. That's done. We've got to wait 8 days from now. And that gives it time to air out. And you may notice that the top of the tank is open, but that's the reason. After 8 days, the contractor selling corrosion will come back and spray it down inside with bleach. This is to disinfect prior to filling. And then the day after the spraying, we'll begin to refill the tank. After that, John Rico will test the water to be sure that it's safe and passes all necessary tests. And after that, the tank goes back online. So there have been very few issues, practically none. As a matter of fact, we had a couple of repairs that needed to be made. There was one small pinhole in the tank which was welded and repaired. The tank overall is in good shape, and it makes me think about maintenance. So I know how hard it is to spend $92,000 on maintenance. 15 years ago, the tank was painted, and if we had to build a new tank, we'd be looking at well over $1 million. So it's money well spent. It's hard to spend, but that's why, to the public, we have these reserves and we have these funds set aside. In the long run, it's better off. Once again, about the airport, we have received approval to have Bob Timberlake survey for the obstructions. this is important because we're sort of in a gray area right now with regard to our license and any future funding from the state. So, once they identify these trees, we've got, or obstructions, we have to take those out, take care of that, and then we get back in compliance with the Department of Aviation, and then we're gonna immediately pursue runway crack field and sealant, because it needs to be done. And they recognize that, and we're all trying to work together. We hope to get all of this accomplished before winter sets in. We really don't want to wait until spring, go through another winter. If we have a hard winter, we could lose a runway, so they know that. It's winding down, I know, but grass continues to be a big issue in the town. We recently forced to cut several yards consisting of vacant or empty houses or lots. These are not people living there, these are vacant or empty. And as y'all know, I've said before, we have very little way to recoup the expense. And in a lot of cases, we can only wait until someone attempts to move back in that house at that particular time. Then the office is set up to not cut services on until we get everything paid and so on that property. That's one way we can collect it, but on these vacant lots, it's just a matter of putting liens on the property, and then at some point, maybe sell them, or if somebody comes along and buy them, then we can get paid. There's a lot of other things that have been going on. Tessa and I have been talking back and forth about ordinances, as much of you know all that. So I'm gonna kind of defer that type of thing to her for her report. And that's all I have.
Thank you.
I have a question for Wade. Wade, what practice do we follow when there's an abandoned house and the door is left open, and I physically saw somebody coming out of there this morning? It's right across the street.
Yeah.
Somebody's sleeping in there.
It's a difficult situation. The police monitor these buildings. And I know that particular one you're talking about, they've been in a couple of times and secured the door as best they could, see what was going on inside, and of course they're breaking in. That particular house is on the list. And I've said this before, we've got so many of these type things in town, and we really do need to figure out what to do. We're getting ready to take the theater building down, as everybody knows. We ran into a snag there where we had to have asbestos report before we could actually take it down. I don't think there's any in there, but this house is probably next on the list, and it's just a matter of getting the building inspector to go by there. All I've got to do is ask him to go by there, and I'm confident he's going to condemn it. But then we're faced with that same issue where we got to put up the money to take it down.
I'm just looking from the standpoint of the door being left open, if there's a way that could be boarded so that they can't get in.
We could do that, yes.
Okay.
It may keep them out.
They still find a way to get in, I think.
No windows?
Well, I mean,
They're gonna get in there if they want to.
you're eliminating some temptation. I mean, the door is wide open.
Yeah.
You know, if it was closed, all right, sure, if they want to go in through a window, they can go in through a window, but if the door is open, it just makes it that much easier for accessibility.
We could open that up as council.
Wait. I saw the owner's son and asked him to do that.
Or would you-
Please board it up, and it's been months ago. He's not gonna do it, they wouldn't do anything with the room there, he's not gonna do it now.
And they also cut back taxes on the property, so there's several avenues to take care of it, but honestly, the costs involved and the things that we have to go through to get it done through legal, we hesitated while we've got another one going on.
Okay.
Wait, you mentioned taxes and liens on these grass cutting. Are we still in the process of sending these off to auction for
On taxes, yes,
taxes?
only on taxes,
Okay, but not on,
not on.
especially these vacant lots that,
I'm not sure, Tessa could probably answer that question quicker. At what point you reach a monetary value for what they owe, that it would justify trying to take control of it and sell it. I mean, I don't know, you're talking
Yeah.
$500-600 a year, grass cutting bills. Taxes is different, yes.
Well, if the town were to then turn around and purchase it, the town could sell it for more of a profit.
But there's a downside to that.
Right.
We would own it, we're maintaining it anyway. A lot of these lots are 50-foot lots. Which right now, based on our ordinance, you can't build on. It's been discussed before too. So, essentially, unless the neighbor wants them, they're pretty much pointless.
But the lien is the same as taxes, it's a 2-year wait, okay.
Correct, yes. Grass cutting liens are treated the same as delinquent taxes. Now, a lot of, and correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of the ones that we've sent off for delinquent taxes also have those grass liens too. So, you know, in essence, we are collecting on some of the grass liens by collecting on the delinquent taxes too. In terms of the threshold for the grass cutting, that's gonna really be, you know, what Mr. Elliott's comfortable with, because he has a certain amount of expenses that he has to put in it. And then, you know, he only recovers if he sells the property. So, you know, that may be something if we want to run it by him. Now, the other downside to that is usually it's good because Jim Elliott, you know, recovers on his cost, and so the town isn't out of anything. But I have seen instances where, you know, he's put it up for sale several times and then it doesn't sell, and then if that happens, my understanding is that the locality would still be on the hook for its cost at the end of the day. So,
And council should consider what value we put on reducing flood and beautification.
That's true, and I think we should put a lot of value on it, as much as we possibly can.
Right.
Because I see that, now that, knock on wood, we feel like we've gotten beyond this sewer issue, that extreme cost to everyone. I see blight and housing and that type of thing is probably the biggest problem this town has. I really do.
We still got to reamp the rest of it too.
Well,
This
yes,
is
but we
cost.
can control that and do that on an annual basis and not have to borrow money. But, it's a problem, these houses. The properties, I mean, it just is. And I don't know the answer. I really don't. Because if you send a building inspector out, which we know this, and they do not condemn it, but they give you a list of deficiencies based on the property maintenance code, then we are almost at a point where he or she, he in this case, is saying, here's what's wrong, it needs to be fixed. So who's going to fix it? It doesn't make sense for the taxpayers, you know, to spend $20,000–$30,000 on a house to bring it up to code when we don't own the house. And unfortunately, we got some people living there. So I don't know what the answer is, I really don't.
What was the original thinking when the ordinance was changed on those 50-foot wide lots? Does anybody know?
Pre-everybody in here, but maybe Billy.
Is it your fault?
He was sitting back in the back listening. I don't think he took too much in.
The town, obviously, if you look at the map, is set up on 50-foot lots, way back when.
It is a concern, to me, from the standpoint of what you just said. If no one is allowed to, if we clean up a lot, but yet it's not, no one is allowed to do anything with it except for the people on either side. If it's all cleaned up, their problem might be solved as far as they're concerned, and have no interest in buying an extra lot and then having to pay tax. I think it's
Well, you can get a variance, probably rebuild. You just have to go through that.
You can.
That's right. It's just like that lot that Josh bought. He loved to put a house up there. You know, financially he can't afford it right now, but one day, because it was actually a house in there.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of what I was thinking about. Most of these lots probably at one time did have
Oh, yeah.
They
a
did.
structure.
And I think they were, I mean, there's still some around, these were two, sometimes three-story houses at 750-foot lots, and, you know, realistically, nobody's gonna build that kind of structure back now, just not. So some type of, I don't know what you call it, a smaller home.
Yeah, build within the footprint, but not
Yeah.
necessarily
Or you do, as Robbie said.
seek variance.
Right. I mean, we own two lots now. We own, and we spend a lot of money on them, and we can't market them, we can't do very well, so. Except cut the grass.
Man, how do you sell it?
Is there a way that you can, if the ones that we owe, that we could divide them, offer them to each neighbor on each side at some type of, I mean, maybe you thought about that already.
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe you wouldn't get full market value, but you might get something out of it.
I know one, there was definitely interest. They said, if you manage to get it straight, cleaned up, I'll buy the lot. But now it's cleaned up and straight, and, you know, nobody's making any offers about it, so.
Well, it's certainly something we need to study and consider and support. Any other questions for the town manager? Thank you, Wade. Moving on to the town attorney's report.
Yes, thank you. The first thing is the chicken ordinance. I have drafted an ordinance that I have passed around to you all for your all's review. Essentially, right now, what it has in the code is, you know, chickens aren't allowed. And what I drafted up was a pretty simple ordinance, and it just strikes that and adds actually what Blackstone has required of their chickens, which is, you know, 200 feet away from any residences, and then, you know, no chickens running at large. So, of course, that's open to your all's wishes. I just threw something out there to get it started, or maybe it's what you all want to do. Just let me know. The sign ordinance, Phil and I have been going over that, and I think he'll address that with you all, unless you wanted to do it now.
We can take care of that under.
Okay. All right, noisy dogs. I passed out a draft of the noisy or destructive dog ordinance. And I have been working on this with the mayor. And essentially, the problem, we have one on the books, and the problem that we have with the one on the books is it's a subjective standard. And so what had happened, probably, you know, a while back now in Virginia Beach was Virginia Beach's noise ordinance was struck down because it was a subjective standard. And so the court there said that it was vague, and basically every locality in the state of Virginia has been revamping and revising their noise ordinance, which is something we probably need to look at another day too. But for these purposes, what I tried to do with the mayor is come up with something that was actually enforceable and constitutional. Because the way it seems now, it just says disturb the quiet of any other person, or which shall habitually damage or destroy the property of others. Well, that doesn't really get us to where we need to be. And so I had added in, you know, at a distance of 50 feet, being able to hear. And then the mayor had actually come up with the definitions for habitual barking and continual barking. One thing I would suggest, if council would like for me to do it, is it will probably be in our best interest to run this ordinance by the Commonwealth's attorney, since she'll be the one ultimately that would be enforcing it. Just to make sure that it meets her standards and that she would be okay with enforcing an ordinance like this. I know that with other jurisdictions that I represent, with specifically regarding the noise ordinance, we have gone to her before and she's had some suggestions for some revisions, so just a thought there. And then I've been working on a keeping of the dogs ordinance. And with that keeping of the dogs ordinance, the mayor and I are still in the process of getting things straight with that and making sure that, we're going in the right direction. Essentially, what this ordinance would propose to do is to limit the, amount of dogs and also regulate the kennels in town. And one suggestion I have had and that I've seen with other localities is possibly tying that into zoning requirements, specifically relating to residential zoning, since a lot of the issues are, in residential areas, possibly having setbacks and things like that. So that's still a work in progress.
I think most of the complaints we're getting about the whole kennel deal is the noise, right?
That was my understanding.
So it seems like if we build the noise part right, then the kennel part kind of takes care of itself. Because if you got a nice quiet kennel, then I bet nobody cares. Just
Yeah.
thought.
Well, I still, as a dog owner, my poor dogs are probably violating everything. Maybe I just don't understand that they're dogs. But is habitual barking, okay, every time the garbage truck comes down the alley, my dogs bark. I mean, it's a cue that,
I wouldn't think so.
well, if you read this, and then when you talk about people passing by on the sidewalk, my dogs bark at them. Actually, I kind of want them to.
Or behind my house in the alley.
Yeah, and then, I mean,
You guys don't love them
they bark at my husband because he always gives them treats. But, I see both sides of it. Of course, we don't want anybody's comfort to be disturbed, but on the other hand, there are small annoyances in life all over the place and all kinds of annoyances, and I hate to see us get tied into something that could potentially really cause some hard feelings.
This looks to me like more of the same. How do you enforce it? Whose interpretation of what is an habitual? Sorry, folks, but we live in town. We just talked about 50-foot lots. You got neighbors, and we're not out of the country. And there's a certain amount of stuff you're gonna have to put up with every now and then.
I don't know.
That's the way it is,
You know,
you know?
My dogs are in the house and they bark when somebody walks by. Not outside.
you probably can't hear them 50 feet away, I don't know, but the enforcement is a big concern to me, and the other part, when I talk to people on both sides of the issue who may have complaints, again, it's still, is it my understanding, the police cannot necessarily, unless they witness the behavior, they don't take it to court. It's still going to be that neighbor who is complaining about their neighbor's dog who has to go. And when I talk to people, that's not necessarily what they're hoping for.
And that's a good point, and that is correct. There has been a lot of questions about, when do police enforce things and when does a citizen have to go to the magistrate? And to answer that question, when you're dealing with misdemeanors, which all of these are misdemeanors, thank goodness they're not felonies. So misdemeanor is anything that carries less, up to 12 months in jail, up to a $2,500 fine. So pretty much everything we're talking about here. And so when that's the case, the police officers would have to see it in order to write the warrant for it right then, or and you can help me out on this one. the citizens would have to go to the magistrate and get that warrant taken out for it.
What I see, there's a lot of misdemeanors that we will interview people, take statements from them, we go down and get the warrant. I don't understand why the dog ordinance is different. If you're making a complaint, you're the one making a complaint, you're gonna end up in court whether you go down and get the warrant, or whether I get the warrant on your behalf and subpoena you to court, you're going to court. And if the complainant's not willing to go to court, I don't think he's got a legitimate foot to stand on
Well,
myself.
what happens if the complaint goes the whole 9 yards or the whole mile, and then all of a sudden, when it's time to go to court, they don't show up, they just dismiss it, that's just eating up all your time. Correct? Or what do they get a contempt of court for not showing up?
They could, if you subpoena them and they're duly subpoenaed, they can find them in contempt for not going, and that's happened.
So-
And then if they get up here and change the story, we just turn right around and charge them making a false complaint. You know, if they're gonna make a complaint, they need to stand with it and not hang us out to dry, a police officer out to dry. And if you got a legitimate complaint, go down and get the warrant yourself and let the court decide whether.
I mean, I don't know how y'all feel, I don't want my police with robberies and drugs and speeding and domestic violence, spending time with a barking dog.
Correct.
Which one do you want? You know?
Well, I should say publicly, I must have the most patient neighbors in the world, and I appreciate them. But in our neighborhood, we all appreciate each other as individuals, and we kind of look on each other's pets as part of the neighborhood. I mean,
That's the way it should be, but unfortunately.
it's not everywhere, and
It's not
my
that way.
concern is that we'll upset, you can't please everybody, but you sure can make everybody mad if you try.
Well, the other thing is, how many complaints do you have from barking dogs all over the whole town compared to one street?
Well,
I mean, I bet you that one street in this town has more complaints than any 3 towns in Nottaway County combined.
There's just one resident or multi-residents?
I think it's just one resident from what I've heard on my radio. And I can tell you, I got sit down there one time. I told the man, get some earplugs and take a Benadryl and go to sleep.
Well, I think that kind of actually supports the ordinance, because you're not gonna be getting all these, if you're only getting calls from one area, then most of these people, it doesn't bother them. But for those people that it does bother them, it gives them a tool in their toolbox to go use it if they want to. It doesn't necessarily mean the cops have to deal with it,
Right.
but it's a tool for them should they need it.
Well, which is what I said earlier, is sort of what we have now. And like I said, more of the same, it's
Yeah.
still gonna fall back on the complaint.
Right.
But it's still gonna fall on the police first, because they're gonna get the call every
I
time.
have that and the girls and.
The first thing the magistrate asks for when you go down there, you talk to the police.
Stupid.
Well, Vice Mayor, in the spirit of moving forward,
Yes.
I move that we lay this on the table,
okay.
which would mean it essentially dies.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
One
Other
last,
things?
yes. Source water protection, well, let me back up to the ordinances, and I don't know if Councilman Reed wants to talk about it now or with continuing business about the dog waste ordinance.
I just got this, so I haven't really
Yeah,
looked at it much.
yeah.
I don't know if Greg changed anything. I resent Greg the animal waste ordinance before, that basically just says, if you're walking your dog and crap in somebody else's yard, you gotta pick it up. Tessie had a couple questions here, but I don't really have anything to say about it right now. I'll take a look at it.
Okay.
One question I had, service dogs,
In that ordinance, service dogs are exempt.
what about the physical ability of the person walking the dog? If a person is not able to bend over,
Mhm. And, you know, my concern about that restriction would be that all of a sudden everybody can bend over. So, you know, if.
Carry it, doctors.
Yeah, my concern is, you know, if we open it up to too much gray area there, everybody's gonna try to take advantage of that. But I thought overall the ordinance was a very good ordinance, it was very well written. My one concern I had is, you know, can we require people, you know, with the dogs to enter onto private property to pick up the dog excrement? Let's say the dog gets off the sidewalk, he goes in someone's yard and poops. Well, number one, if those people have no trespassing zones, then basically you're like encouraging them to do that, which I can understand that. But then my other concern is, well, what if they don't, but there's, you know, I want to be careful there, but then my other concern is, you know, what if we say it's just on public property? Well, that's okay, but then, you know, you're kind of defeating the spirit of the ordinance. So just something to think about.
Well, I will say, I've talked to town officials in other towns who have passed something like this, and they were not very happy with their results. So I think we need to be, my opinion is we need to be cautious. And
Well,
not
you
exactly
are-
sure what we've been doing all these years.
You're also gonna have a whole lot of what we were talking about. And there may be situations where policemen may see what's going on and witness it more so than the other. But still, it's gonna be people calling saying, I saw my neighbor's dog in my yard.
Well,
So what do you do?
I know that there is a problem at the post office, that was, and I see it. But, well, I see the result. But nobody sees anybody out there with dogs, so again, I don't know, it is a problem. I guess at the end of the day, we just have to clean up our property, whether we want
I
to or
think as
not.
long as you accept the fact that you've got something,
Yeah,
and it's not foolproof, you know, and it gives some people ammunition, I'll say.
but I agree that at the post office in particular, it is a problem.
They have identified the dog. Yes.
You have more pictures of it at the post office.
10 most wanted.
I think he made it to the top 5.
There's a dog.
And the last thing,
Our most wanted is a animal.
I'm just picturing a little dog.
I know.
The last thing I have is the source water protection plan, and this is something that we had discussed last time, specifically relating to Crystal Lake. And what can the town do to protect its source water out there, given the town doesn't own it? And so the Virginia Department of Health have put out a pretty extensive publication about what the town needs to do and different procedures and things like that. And then the first thing really that it instructs the town to do, which is something just for you all to start to think about, would be getting together a local advisory committee. And essentially a committee to, and they, of course, suggest to get some stakeholders in it too. I would suggest if this is the route you all wanna go, that we definitely need to get someone in Nottaway County involved, because Nottaway County is going to be really key to being able to do anything about this. Getting together a local advisory committee that, really gathers all the information and puts together a comprehensive source water plan to protect going forward.
Who would be considered a stakeholder?
It could be citizens. It says here the local advisory committee membership typically consists of waterworks employees, county and local government officials, county or regional government representatives, board members, and/or water customers. Extensive knowledge of source water protection or the water system components is not a prerequisite to becoming a committee member. So, but one thing I would say is, you know, I was kind of like, I don't know that we need to do that, why don't we just go down the road? But it is such a comprehensive thing to do, and the Department of Health really wants certain requirements met of these source production plans, so I feel like perhaps getting some sort of local advisory committee together would facilitate the process a lot better.
Have you seen anything in there, Tessie, about, they've got to help you somewhat with the size of the facility, and, you know, relating to what you can allow on there, such as boats and that type of thing. And ours being small, I would think it would qualify for no gas engines at all. But I don't know if you saw anything in there. And the reason I bring that up is I don't know, at some point we may have to bring in a consultant to tell us what type of facility we have, what level, and what it could stand if something were to happen.
That is a portion of it. Frankly, I was a little bit dismayed that it wasn't more of it. A lot of it seemed to be kind of touchy-feely stuff that I'm not sure is going to get to our problem here, you know.
Places like Sandy River, limited to 9 horsepower motors, which means less gas, and that's what it's all about, and contamination, but they also, it's not using the reservoir yet.
And I think that really to do that, we're gonna have to engage the county and see if we can get somewhere with them. I mean, of course, if for some reason the county isn't engaged, we have other options as a town to, you know, I mean, last resort could always be, we have to take it by eminent domain, but I don't think that that would be anything that the town wanted to do, especially if there's other less restrictive options. But we have to get the county involved if we're gonna do anything less restrictive.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's going to be opposition.
But Vice Mayor, I would then move that we empower the mayor to consult with the town attorney, the town manager, and John Rico, and appoint a committee by the October meeting.
Take care of that for you.
I got one question. Our fish used to fish even if we had a boat, and there's a restriction there, that's only trolling boats. Can't use gasoline engine.
You run 99 in anything, can't you? I
I
have.
don't think so.
But I know Swift Creek's 10 times the size of Crystal Lake, and you can only run gas, you can only run electric in that. That's huge. You can still only use electric.
I mean,
So
these
that
other
takes
places
your
have,
point.
there's got to be something out there that we can use, but I agree, who wants to drink gasoline?
No, you're gonna lock the plant up if you put gasoline in there.
Well, you know, the development is the other issue where these septic systems are going in and around the lake. And all of those lots that were sold, you've got clearing going on.
That seems to be more of a threat, I would think.
It is.
Well, I agree
Traffic.
with Council.
Don't they have certain restrictions that they have to follow? I mean, there's nobody monitoring what they're doing as far as EPA and everything else?
Not right now.
That doesn't sound like it.
And that's kind of the point of what we've been concerned about
I
here.
know John Rico is concerned about it, and monitors for E. coli, and that type of thing, and he's concerned, so. We can't afford to let that happen. I mean, whatever we have to do, we have to protect the water supply.
We will allow the mayor, when he feels better, and the town manager to work on getting that together
Did
from the report. Do we
I guess
need
that's
to-
part of the mayor's powers is to appoint committees, so I guess we don't need to vote on it.
I was gonna say, do we need to vote? Feel more comfortable with
That's reasonable.
it? All
I
right.
think we're good.
All right, next is the mayor's report, and I'll just briefly comment. The mayor attended the Celebrate Family event on Saturday, August 26th, and I've heard from everybody who went that it was a really nice event, good turnout. So we thank the people who sponsored that and made it possible. It was a true community effort and event. Also, you all have in your packet the letter from Norfolk and Southern Railroad responding to the town's request to seek the donation of land where the CBYRA recreational youth fields and the Crewe War Memorial and the Crewe Municipal Park are presently located. And Norfolk and Southern's response is that they cannot at this time donate the land, and the total assessed value of the land is $101,700. So that will be a discussion for the future. Committee reports. Infrastructure Committee, Councilman Sis. Finance,
No report.
Personnel Committee, it's me, no report. Volunteer Services,
No report.
Economic Development.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Very briefly, the Nottaway County Economic Development Committee met a few weeks ago. One major point that they touched on that impacts the town of Crewe, Trout River is selling their salvage.
When did that come about? I thought we were trying to reorganize, when he, last time I talked to somebody like that.
Fell through.
You did?
That's all the information that I have on that. The VML conference, I would encourage everyone to go. It's early next month, in October. The VML Legislative Committee met a month or so ago. And I'm not sure if I touched on this at the last meeting, I don't think about it, but I'll touch on it again in case I didn't. Two things that that impact the town of Crewe. Our request for including the full funding for parks was put in their legislative agenda, and the lottery from localities moved from the legislative agenda to the policy statement, which means that it's more solidified, because the legislative agenda for VML is a one and done document, whereas the policy statement is long lasting. And those will be voted on at the conference meeting, as part of the advice whole. Finally, nope, that's it.
Thank you. Moving on to continuing business, some of these things we have already discussed at length. Sign ordinances.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. The sign ordinances, the town attorney recommends you have your.
Yes.
There are a few concerns that she has that. The first is whether or not we want this as part of the zoning ordinance or an ordinance in general.
Yeah, just a regular ordinance. And the reason I say that is the town already does have one regular ordinance on signs anyway. But the way that this sign ordinance was written, it's actually talking more about zoning, and there's also further regulations of signs in our zoning ordinance.
Now, the difference between the zoning ordinance and the regular ordinance, as I understand it, if it's part of the zoning ordinance, the zoning administrator can go out and basically administrate. Whereas if it's a regular ordinance, we need to determine who and put into the ordinance who can enforce enforce it, whether it's the police department, the town manager, things of that nature. The downside for having it in the zoning ordinance is that it first has to go to the zoning committee, the planning commission, thank you, before it comes to us. Bunch of bureaucracy.
And who is the
Well, if,
zoning
Administrator and town manager.
town
well, if we, so it would have to go through the planning commission, and then that would give the town manager the authority to basically enforce it.
That's right.
But if we put it as our own standalone ordinance, then we choose who enforces it.
That's correct.
So then we just choose the town manager and skip that other part.
That's correct. Are those the only two
I
distinctions?
don't see the difference there.
Yeah, those would be really the only two distinctions, and of course, if it were a zoning ordinance, it could be enforced more like, it would be enforced as a zoning violation versus however it would be enforced as the sign ordinance, which, may have different mechanism of the violation.
Just for clarification here, what are we talking about as far as what you're trying to accomplish? Because in the zoning ordinances, there are restrictions on signs and so and so. And I thought what we were looking at was the condition of signs, maybe size.
It's not sign, all that we're looking at is maintenance of signs.
Okay.
So, for example, if there's an old grocery store with a busted out sign that's been sitting there for 3 years, having some action against some, just hypothetically.
Could that not fall under something in the property maintenance?
It could also be tied into, the property maintenance code, or, through the building code, but my suggestion is, and, would just be doing a normal ordinance
I'm
for
just
it.
wondering if we don't already have the authority based on the property maintenance code that applies to buildings, everything.
Mhm.
Because that's the only reason why it's brought to us anyway, because the condition of one sign, and then we contacted somebody and they fixed it, right?
What it was, if everybody remembers,
Originally, right.
was the posters that we put on one, that we had a complaint. Said it didn't look good, and I guess that's what started this whole thing. And I'm not saying it did or didn't, but would I have the authority to go say, you've got to take these posters off that sign?
Mhm.
And I guess that's what we're looking for, right?
Right, but we're not, talking about the posters, unless the posters became decrepit and
Okay.
weren't maintained. Just signs that are not maintained.
So it sounds to me like the zoning part of it doesn't really need to be changed. We just need some sort of authority, if you will, for property maintenance.
Right.
And if you already got that in,
I think we do, but.
if you already got it, but you just.
I think all that's covered under the Virginia property maintenance code.
Mhm.
Is it?
I honestly, I don't know off the
Okay.
top of my head.
We'll look- we can
So
look
I
at
can look and
well-
see.
Either way, when we
Okay.
pass it, make it a rule, or if it's already in there, then we can just start enforcing.
Okay, well, if the town attorney can look into that, and we'll have a final proposal or final solution at the,
October.
thank you, October, it's been a long day.
Next time.
It must have been.
Is there any update on water rates?
There is, the town manager reached out to Hurt and Profit and got a response from Hurt and Profit. Also, as you'll recall, my math was a little incorrect. I did a 1 month, basically, it was incorrect on the annual revenue from, in-town businesses. What I said was $910 annually, it's actually $910 monthly. The total revenue that we would need to make up, for that part of the proposal is $10,920, which is the annual revenue that would be lost if the lowering the, by $10, would come in effect. It's bringing the total to $56,920, for money that we're looking to gain, which would come out to an increase of 58 cents, for over 3,000 gallons for, out-of-town businesses. So,
In a separate,
right,
separate ordinance price for the prison,
right, exactly.
I'm just saying.
So, what I would recommend is a three-part motion. To advertise for the following public hearings. To lower the in-town base rate for in-town business customers by $10 per month. Part two, to increase the usage rate for over 3,000 gallons for out-of-town businesses by 58 cents. And part three,
Well, is that 58 cents per thousand, or how, you said?
yeah, I'm sorry, yes, 58
We need,
cents
we need to
per
verify
thousand.
that.
That's correct, I'm sorry, thank you. 58 cents per thousand.
Additional,
Right.
that's what it is now.
Yeah, like it's two, like it's $2 a thousand, it's go to 58.
And part three is to authorize the town manager to negotiate flat rate contracts with the out-of-town businesses impacted. And once that's done, that will then require another public hearing in order to vote on those contracts, because we're then moving into the equitability territory and need to have those contracts in the ordinance, I believe. Correct.
That's right. You gotta put them in the ordinance, that's right.
Okay.
Okay, we have a motion to
Second.
advertise for the public hearing on these three items. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Okay.
Yeah, you got a question?
Too late for that.
No, we can, just under continuing business, consider water rates too. I've been approached by several people that understood they're gonna drop the water rates for the businesses, but they don't know why, as a resident, they can't drop their water rates.
Okay.
That's
So I guess
that's a simple question, you know, I don't know, I reckon the businesses run on you about lowering their rates, or you just.
Well, they didn't raise the rates before, they raised them for the business, correct?
No, raised all of
No,
them.
they raised it all.
Everybody get raised.
Well, the formula was, the whole point of raising both was to help pay for the loan. So that's why we had to engage the current prophet to say, go back and look at this and tell us what you think we can do, because that's the bottom line is.
See, Rick, at one point, the water was paying for the sewer, all the sewer, at one point. And the way things have been structured with the sewer project, the water rates just won't do it.
I think one point was, in the interest of economic development, you had quite a few small businesses who weren't using any more water than a residential.
Not even that.
Not
Yeah, not even
Right.
as much as a
You don't
residential
use any
customer.
water.
I don't.
We use about 100 gallons, 200 gallons a month.
Yeah, that's what it's come out, basically.
Right.
Turn on the
And
faucet.
So I think that was why the business rate
Exactly.
was being considered.
That's right.
When Simmons was mayor, they raised the business and didn't raise the resident.
That's true.
When, you know, they said the rates weren't high enough, the engineers did, and you're trying to get loans and so forth.
But the last time we did it, everybody paid.
Right, thank you.
And just to
Good.
clarify that the first two parts require public hearing, the third part does not need to be included in the public hearing until we have a
Okay.
contract price.
That's it.
Next under, I'm sorry.
He didn't finish,
Oh,
but
Sorry.
he's still looking in the air. Look at the rest of
Sorry, it's
See if it's a furrier, if they're gonna bring it down to him.
Also, under continuing business on our agenda, we also had the animal ordinances, but I think we've discussed those previously.
just the chicken ordinance needs to be discussed, if we can briefly. 200 feet of an occupied building seems a little.
You're not gonna be able to raise money, I think.
Exactly. I believe 200 feet was the Same as the honeybee ordinance.
Is that what Blackstone has, 200 feet?
I copied it from the ordinance today.
So more or less not too many people in Blackstone raising chickens.
I would recommend the following ordinance.
Wonder why that is.
That's what she wrote it up.
I don't know what that is. I really don't.
I do.
I would recommend the following to change the ordinance as written to, it shall be unlawful for roosters, ducks, or other fowl to be kept within the town. The restrictions set forth in this section shall not apply to the keeping of not more than 4 female chickens per residence.
Well, remember last time it had to be in a coop. It could not be run at large.
We can certainly add additional restrictions if,
Well, that's the way everything
but
was.
with each additional restriction, that's additional time out of the town managers.
So who's
Enforcement.
gonna count the chickens and be sure they're in the coop?
I don't mention anything about keeping my, my.
I mean, seriously.
Well, wouldn't that be another case
It's not
where
gonna be a
nobody's
problem.
gonna go out there and count them unless somebody calls and complains and says,
Yeah.
they got too many chickens over there, then you go. Somebody
So
got
it's,
5
it's
chickens
a
over there.
tool, as
It's a
the
tool,
councilman said
yeah.
before, it's a tool for people to use, but it doesn't mean that we need to go out there and,
Money.
exactly.
What are you gonna put a fee per year per chicken?
I'm not sure that that's necessary.
I
But
would-
I'll,
the
We have to
original,
make them buy some kind of permit, right? I mean, we're government.
Yeah, I think so.
the original, and the reason I would support a fee is because in the original document that I gave out, whenever it was, a couple of meetings ago, there was some training involved, and there have been health reports lately with a major increase in salmonella, especially in children, and it seems to be in the medical community attributed to backyard chicken coops. So I think for health reasons, it's important to have people take the course, and then they can bring that in order to receive their permit.
okay, let me go ahead and read everything, and council can make note of the sections they like and don't like, and we can go from there. So as I mentioned, it shall be unlawful for roosters, ducks, or other fowl not to be kept within the town. The restrictions set forth in this section shall not apply to the keeping of not more than 4 female chickens per residence. So basically that limits it to 4 residents. Okay, the next item, coop pen location and construction. The following restrictions shall apply to the location of a licensed chicken coop. 1, no fenced area, pen, or structure for the keeping of such chickens shall be located closer than 15 feet to any dwelling on an adjacent lot. 2, no fenced area or pen for the keeping of such chickens shall be located within any required front yard or street side yard. 3, owner shall provide 3 square feet of space for each chicken to allow for the humane keeping of the chickens with at least 1 foot of run per chicken. 4, the coop pen area shall consist of 4 walls and a roof with no fencing slats greater than 2 inches apart. Part 3, adequate care. Feed must be stored in secure and rodent-proof containers. Part 4, slaughter. Except when such action is performed by a law enforcement or animal control official in the course of official duties, it shall be unlawful for residents to slaughter or otherwise kill chickens in town limits.
So you gotta carry that.
Exactly.
Or have the police come and shoot them.
Why have to turn with a deer?
That's the key. Why have to return with a deer?
Back to.
Next part. Placement of license tag on coop chickens at large. The owner of a coop shall securely fasten the identification plates provided to the coop enclosure in full view. Any license tag not so in use must be kept by the owner or custodian and promptly shown to any animal control officer or other official upon request. A chicken shall not be permitted to stray beyond the limits of the enclosure, but this shall not prohibit removing chickens therefrom temporarily while under the control of the owner or custodian for the purpose of exercising or show.
What if they poop?
You gotta get it up.
Not yet. Next section, owner education. The owner of a coop shall participate in the chicken education course provided by the Virginia Cooperative Extension. Upon successful completion of the course, the owner shall provide to the town manager evidence of such successful completion. Next section, permit and registration. coop owners, having achieved adequate certification and paid all required licensing taxes, shall register the location of their coop and number of chickens, owner name, address, and phone number, and evidence of certification to the town manager. And finally, licensing tax. The amount of the annual license tax on each chicken of resident owners who reside within the boundary limits of the town shall be $5 per year per chicken. Licenses shall be issued for each calendar year, January 1st to December 31st inclusive.
Thank you.
Yes.
He did say that was everything, and you can pick and choose, so.
Well,
Right.
we did vote, I thought, last month.
On the entire?
Well, we didn't, we voted to
authorize
have,
a hearing, right?
to authorize the
We
hearings.
didn't have one, did we?
We didn't have one because I
That's
don't,
not,
Well,
that was my fault.
We
I
didn't
just-
have an ordinance.
we didn't
Yeah.
have an ordinance.
I got confused, and so I drafted this
I was
ordinance.
confused too. So.
I
Okay.
can't imagine why.
So now we need to have another advertisement, right?
If
Well,
you
we
want
did
all-
have-
if you
we
want
did
all
have-
that, if you want all that in the, what he's got, yeah.
I mean, you gotta show everybody what the ordinance is gonna say, and then have the public hearing.
And we can at the public hearing delete
Yes.
things, correct? Okay.
Yeah, you just came in.
So I would move that we advertise that as the chicken ordinance, and that'll give us all time to consider it, and,
We need more chairs.
I don't think you need
Okay, so you're making a motion.
Yes.
Correct. To advertise for a public hearing using the ordinance that Bill read in its
You're gonna need a chicken man.
entirety. Do I hear a second?
I think.
Okay.
that. He sucks.
Aaron?
Yeah.
Aaron second. All those in favor?
aye.
Opposed?
Yes.
So we're the same place we were last time. Switch votes. Okay, so a public hearing on the chicken ordinance next. All right.
Excuse me, can I just ask that that ordinance be printed out so we have it at the next meeting?
I gave that out, pretty much the whole thing.
Absolutely, and I'm sure it'll be included in the next thing, and it'll be
I need a
sent
copy.
through the paper.
I gave that out.
Oh, then I have it at
Send it.
home.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
It's the same.
Perfect,
Okay.
just in.
Yeah, I'll send it to you. And then I'll draft the public
All
hearing.
right, moving on to new business. I don't have anything from the mayor. He listed annexation. Has there been any movement on that?
Very on, contacted county administrator. He said the council needed to engage, or the mayor needs to engage the board. So I suggest the board talk to Crewe Citizens.
Okay.
Well, I will tell you, one thing that happened at the meeting that we had last Thursday is the Verizon, the number of people complaining about drop calls, not, all this stuff. And the county is supposed to be getting with Verizon about the problem they got. I don't know whether they did, they put in was the planning committee.
They've advertised on Facebook, people to call the planning office, give them any information on problems that they've had on Verizon.
Because it was really something when one of them says, well, Blackstone's having the same problem as Crewe, which I would have thought Blackstone had any problems, because the tile's right there. That's something else we can engage as a small town. I don't know how many people in the town of Crewe actually actually got Verizon phones. I know where I'm at it, mine really, so many words, ain't worth it all.
I can't use mine in Crewe hardly anymore, and I used to be able to just fine.
Yeah.
I'd like to know what's going on.
I have Verizon too.
I have trouble with Verizon.
I didn't used to.
I have Verizon, I have a terrible time with it in Crewe.
See, what got me was the way Blackstone was having problems. And then it had nobody done it.
All right, so moving on to the recreation rezoning. That was an idea.
Yes, I'm in favor of it, whether the rest of the council. If council will recall, we proposed, the Economic Development Committee proposed a new zoning district for recreation zones, establishing recreation zones. To include the Luke Stadium, Children's Park behind the VFW, Railroad Park, Mitchell Park, Crewe Country Club, and Library Park. The recreation zone would limit the uses for which these green spaces could be used, and it's basically for what they're currently being used for, recreation. Were there any thoughts?
Where do we go with that? Does that have to go to the zoning board?
I would simultaneously advertise for a public hearing, send it to the zoning board because it's a zoning change. So send it to the planning commission, advertise for a public hearing, and before the public hearing, talk to the owners of each of these facilities just to gauge their.
Out of all the properties that you have mentioned, how many did the town have?
Two.
And we need to give them written notice too.
What I would do is advertise for a public hearing for creating the zone, creating it. And then, once it's created, so it would go through the planning commission and we create at the next meeting. Once it's created, we talk about rezoning the other ones, because that'll give us time to talk to the owners and so basically do this in piecemeal rather than.
What two do we own? Other than VFW, I think we've.
The library.
Have a deed on that?
Among we're sitting on right now.
Library.
Well, I know that. Do we have a clear deed of the VFW yet?
No, don't know.
Well, I would recommend that we table it till next month. If we're gonna have a public hearing next month on the chicken ordinance, I think it might be wise to wait 1 month.
I still think Tassie needs to look into the railroad property and us changing it, rezoning it at this point.
And, one thing that raises my concerns, and I'm not saying that this is so or it is not so, and this will be one thing I could look into if town council would authorize me, is that, I know sometimes that certain landowners would have an argument essentially for inverse condemnation. If in fact the zoning was lowered, essentially what they would say is, you have reduced my zoning to the point where in essence you have essentially taken my property because you've taken my whole bundle of uses from me. And so, you know, if that's something council wants me to look into just to make sure that we're gonna be safe from those arguments if they're even made.
I mean, it's no secret that the railroad has said they're gonna sell that property.
No, they don't want to rezone the unit.
They told us no on the donation that they're going to now, the dollar figure that you saw in here was assessed value. So now we go and change the zoning to recreation only after they've said that they were gonna sell the property. I'm not so sure that will go too well.
Well, I would recommend we have the town attorney study the options and the implications or repercussions before we.
I would still like to have the hearing to establish the recreation zoning, if only for the two that the town owned, and potentially talking with the school board, what the school board is. The private businesses and private entities.
Why can't we do this, let the town manager contact the superintendent and go from there about the school property, and then we know what our property's all about anyway, other than VFW, because we don't have a clear deed to that yet.
My only concern is I don't want this effort to be contingent upon some of these properties that we're discussing. The effort by itself has nothing to do with rezoning private property, it's more to do with preserving green space that we can preserve.
Well,
So
why can't we put this off for another month? 'Cause, it shouldn't hurt anything.
We certainly can, but just with the understanding that even if the town attorney comes back and says you can't do that, I'd still like to do it for the establish the district for.
So what you wanna do is pay for advertisement, to have a public hearing at the next meeting, and then go by what Tessie has to bring to the table? Is that what you're saying?
No, that's the exact opposite of what I'm saying. What?
I thought you said you wanted a public hearing for the green area.
That's
Where
right.
you could reserve.
That's correct.
But
For establishing a district.
why can't we wait and spend all the money at one time? We can do it all at one time instead of just doing partials, because if something happens, you have to go somewhere else, you gotta do it again.
Because it would require 2 public hearings regardless. Because we can't both create the zone and rezone in the same public hearing. So we would have to be paying for 2 advertisements
Well,
and have 2 public hearings.
Well, the planning committee is gonna have to be involved in it anyway, right?
Yes, that's right.
I've got a question, maybe I'm not following exactly what it's, so, it seems like the hangup is, obviously, any landowner isn't necessarily gonna want their property rezoned as recreational, because we can't do anything else with
That's
it.
correct.
So, we would essentially only be rezoning property that we already own.
That's correct.
Well, what's the point in that? We already own it, so why do we need to rezone?
To,
Protect it against future councils doing something with it?
partly, sure.
Just curious.
Sure.
It
No,
seems
just-
kind of
just-
redundant to rezone land that we already control.
Well, and some of these owners may be okay with this. Or say if we were to one day acquire other land, it would be a very simple process to rezone that, rather than having to create the zone. So it's looking forward to the future. And we are Virginia's first healthy eating, active living community.
Do I hear a motion?
I'll table that until the next meeting.
Okay. Points of personal privilege, Councilman Reed?
None.
Yeah, personal privileges.
No, not anymore.
Councilman Sis?
Nothing.
I will say, I don't know if this is personal privilege, but the town manager and I will be working tomorrow on updating and marking our progress on the comprehensive plan. We meet at 1:30 tomorrow in his office, so if anybody has any strong feelings that what we need to include in there, just let me know. Councilman Knight? Councilman Abel?
I get a street sign for Powell and Guy Avenue.
Is there any grant money I guess?
No.
It's gone.
It's gone. I get lost when I can't see where I'm looking.
I have no idea.
That's your street,
I
right?
think
That's where you started.
Yeah, that's it.
Well, we need Councilman Abel
Need
to
a grant or
get
power,
on.
I'll get one to do.
Need to get me home.
Councilman Muskovic?
I would just suggest including recreation rezoning in your in the comprehensive plan, but other than that, excellent
I'll
job,
make
Vice Mayor, filling in today.
Public comment, we've had some people come in since the beginning of the meeting, do I have anybody?
Susan got to say.
Susan?
The chickens, like I'm all about the chickens. I really like the idea of having chickens, and I'm okay with chickens in town. Don't you think $5 a chicken a year is pretty cheap? Seems to me like money is a, how do you say it, I think the more money somebody has invested in the project they're doing, they're a little bit more inclined to do it right. I think when you make it so low that, you know, a middle schooler can pay for it, you kind of are opening yourself up to a little bit more of a problem. It seems to me like something like $100 a year, because people that really want them for the purposes of eating better chicken eggs they're not gonna mind that, they're gonna do that, but it just seems like $5 a chicken is really cheap.
We'll bring that back to the public hearing, and we'll,
Yeah, I mean, I'm just making mention of that, you know, because it just seems that, and there should be some type of a penalty when you let your chickens go at large, you know, when you've got, you know, wild chickens, you know.
Chicken privileges are suspended.
Yeah, your chicken, you know, but, and then the other one, I always keep hearing, and I'm gonna come back to it again, is
About
that,
a
and I
leash.
had meant, I like, really love all the things that we wanna do in town and whatnot, but I'm not trying to protect Wade, cause I really don't, you know, like, what can I say? But it always seems to come back on Wade as the enforcement officer. And as a citizen, I begin to wonder how much you can keep laying on the town manager's desk to enforce and to enforce and to enforce with absolutely no help at all. It's great to have these privileges in our town, but don't you think he maybe could use a little help enforcing these
I
things?
told you we're gonna need a chicken man if we pass that ordinance.
Well, but I mean, there's many other things in town going on with abandoned cars and crappy houses and abandoned houses that, you know, whatever, that need to be tended to, but everything, I know, if I was the town manager, and I've dealt with many over the years, that's an added responsibility to one person, and it diminishes his capacity to do well in other areas when you throw so much on just the one person, does, in my opinion.
I agree with you,
Okay.
and that's why I'm
That's why we
probably,
got Wade.
I'm the one that is very cautious about instituting new ordinances. It's not always that I'm against the idea, but I don't want to throw, we have, and Wade spoke earlier, our infrastructure, our blight, we have a lot of very important things that we have an opportunity to make headway on now that we've got some things behind us and accomplished. And I hate to just, every time somebody has a problem with something, create an ordinance that again, then maybe nobody will call and complain, or maybe
Well,
no one
everybody
will have-
always, somebody always calls and complains, don't you think? I mean, that's kind of a given. You're gonna get somebody that always, oh, shut up, somebody that always calls and complains.
I don't believe it.
But I'm just saying, I just think it's a lot to continue to lay on the town manager himself, and it seems to me, these are all really great ideas. Even if there's a part-time position or a voluntary position or a committee that's created that can help enforce these things, so that, why have an ordinance if it's not gonna be followed?
I
Why
agree.
create it
I
if you
agree.
are not, and if you aren't firm and settled on the ordinance, in other words, if you say, okay, you have 30 days to do something, by golly, at the end of 30 days, whatever punishment was supposed to happen, it should be happening. It shouldn't wait another 30 days and another, you know, otherwise people just, it's like kids, you know, you keep threatening them, you count to three times.
I
and
will
you have a
say,
problem.
Vice Mayor, that when we put these things on the town manager's desk, the town manager is empowered to delegate to subordinates. Council, however, should not be delegating to the town manager's subordinates. We're just going through a chain of command. So when we say town manager, the town manager is the chief administrative officer. He then passes these things.
But does he have enough people in his staff to have the capacity to be able to enforce these ordinances? Does that make sense? Is that okay. Just laying it on the table, you
Mr.
know?
Crawley,
I thought Susan was a Wade Walker advocate over here.
No, I'm absolutely against him.
The chicken thing is, I mean, I think we should have chickens. How you all do it is fine. We don't need another ordinance. The dog barking is a real questionable thing. If we've got an issue with a kennel or such, shouldn't we just address the issue? Because everybody in Crewe has dogs, and we are a small town. You know, as far as dog waste, am I gonna ask my neighbor who's elderly to go out and tell the neighbor to stop walking his dog in front of her house, or am I gonna ask her to do it? I'm gonna do it. It's our responsibility to kind of take care of our own town. I don't understand why we're having this issue with the dog barking. That's not gonna go away. It's not gonna stop.
It's only one place that we've had.
Right, so my thing is address the issue rather than addressing the whole town.
Well, just like one bad apple in a peck.
I understand that.
That's what you're looking.
Yeah, I
How do
understand.
you address the issue then?
I don't know, I understand that completely, but, you know, maybe we need to address that issue. If they're gonna have a kennel, that's fine. Maybe we need to limit the dogs. You know, I don't know.
Well, can't you
But we
address,
could-
you can address
Hold
it.
on one second. Maybe we could just think about something else, but other than saying, we're gonna put an ordinance on dog barking. Because we are a small town, and people are not gonna get rid of their dogs. And dog barking's gonna go on. I think we have a bigger issue with cats. You know, we're talking about chickens, we got more dead cats laying around than we're gonna find chickens. So, I mean, you know, we need to look at the big picture here. I don't know what you're gonna do about the dilapidated housing, or the property with the grass. But when you look at our economic situation in our community, and where people are and how many of them are on fixed incomes, or how many of them are rental properties, you know, that's a bigger picture there. You know, some of the people can't afford to fix their houses, some of them can't afford to do certain things. Some of these people are stuck in situations where they can't sell because of their income, and they really can't do anything else. So, you know, we've got a bigger issue here. And I really don't know how you're gonna fix that. The number of rental property, you've got people putting up fences because of rental property. You're gonna have you've had people put up fences because they don't want town people looking around saying we can't have chickens or dogs. You know, I mean,
That happens too.
so you gotta think about those things. I really don't know how we're gonna handle the issue with the property, because that is a very serious issue. But we are in a dire strait with the economic development that's here in the community.
And it doesn't just, it's not just in Crewe. It's in
Oh, no, it's
many
everywhere.
small towns.
It's everywhere.
And we have to work together
Exactly, and you
try to
have to
find
work within
what
that.
solutions we can.
You know, I had an experience, no particular area mentioned, but here over the summer, Ray and I kind of took it upon ourselves to start going out every weekend, and we just would go out and clean up an area, just one little, like an area, a curb or gutter. We'd work out there a couple hours, and it was amazing, the areas that we cleaned up have remained cleaned up. So, and it sounds really funny, but it's almost like we maybe embarrassed a few of the people because they didn't keep their areas cleaned up, and we just went out there in the street and cleaned them up, and now all of a sudden, we're seeing that some of those areas are cleaned up. So I think pride reaps pride, and lack of pride reaps more lack of pride. So we need to, so and as far as our blight and that type of thing, and maybe I'm living in a dream world because of the wash bucket people, because our goal and our mission is to improve our town and improve small towns. But, you know, my hope and my dream is to not only lead by what we're doing, but lead by example. Does that, and I think when we can start doing little things that will help bring back the beautiful little town that I hear this little town used to be, then that comes from a community
I think
effort.
it's still beautiful in quite a few, in many ways.
Pardon?
I think it's beautiful in many ways. I don't want to be so
Yeah.
negative.
But as far as, well, I mean, there is a lot of blight, but it is, I mean, parts of it are just beautiful. But as far as like the dog noise, okay, as far as the
We
dog
do have
noise,
a time limit.
can it be handled with just the noise ordinance and period? Don't we have a noise ordinance? Throw it under that category?
In the interest of time, we need to move on. Are there any other citizens who would like to make comment? All right, it's been brought to my attention that I neglected to call for a vote on the public hearing, so at this time, could we do that? I'd like to hear a motion on
So you do them all at once,
I would
or
rather
you have to do
not.
separate?
do them separate. Okay.
All right, I make a motion that under the town charter amendment, section 3.5, powers and duties of the mayor, we accept it.
Second.
We have a motion and second.
To clarify, this is asking the General Assembly to
That's
change our
correct.
charter.
That's
Change
correct.
the charter. We have a motion and a second to request the change of charter from the General Assembly. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay. And can we entertain a motion on the second?
Ordinance amendment, section 2-1, 179 and 2-180. I'll make a motion to pass it.
I have a motion, do I hear a second?
Vice Mayor, speaking to the proposal, there's a couple of concerns that I have with it. First, it would currently, as the charter is written, because again, we asked the General Assembly to change the charter. Until the General Assembly acts, the charter is as it was 3 minutes ago. If we were to change this now, our ordinances would be in contradiction to the town charter. I think the appropriate time for passing this would be if and when the General Assembly approves.
I agree.
Yeah. I withdraw my motion.
Okay, all right, thank you. Thank you, Councilman Knight. All right, at this time, we do have one matter to discuss in executive session. I need a motion to adjourn into executive session consistent with Virginia State Code 2.2-3711.
Which one are we?
We're doing property.
Okay, thank you.
Who made the motion?
Aaron.
Aaron, Billy.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. We will now go into executive session.
Thank you.
Open session, we need to certify the only matters concerning
So
Virginia
moved.
State Code. Okay,
So moved.
so moved.
Second.
All right, we need to certify by roll call.
Yes.
Councilman Reed,
I certify.
Councilman Fisk, Councilman Foss,
Certified.
I certify.
Certified.
Yes.
All right. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Billy, second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Vote on your way out the door.
Hey, Steve.